But that's what it's about. You know, if we don't collectively choose to, this unlearning journey, I mean, we know the world that we have. We know what it is. It just gets entrenched and changed, and it's all icky, and people can say it's no longer here. But our kids, we deserve a reimagined and different world, and it starts with our own unlearning and our own transformation. And we believe then you're changing systems, you're changing policies, you're making different decisions because you see other groups. You are in collective with other groups. You know, it's not just about your privilege, your normalcy. Like, this is what everybody experiences.
Yes. Roxanne.
You're taking notes.
I love it, girl. Take notes. Take notes.
And I appreciate the correction about a safe. That blows my mind. That is so good. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Black History Month episode of Hairitage Talks. I am Tamekia Swint, the founder and executive director of Styles for Kids, and I am super excited about the guests that we have for you today. So our first guest is Roxanne Engstrom. And Roxanne Engstrom is a transracial adoptive mother. She is a business owner, a Jesus lover, MS warrior, advocate for others, and you're very, very dear to our community because she's also the Styles for Kids photographer and takes amazing photos for our social media.
You guys make it easy.
Well, Roxanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Like, share your story. What is it that you want our audience to know about you?
I have been so blessed to be a part of the work of Styles for Kids. And I have told Tamekia over the years of being involved, just seeing how the depth of what you are really doing is so beneficial to kids and to families. And it's just been such a gift to be a part of that in a very small way. So my daughter personally has been so empowered, excited. I mean, she loves the playlist at Styles for Kids. She loves the hair she gets at Styles for Kids, the women. And I often think when I'm sitting there either photographing or when my daughter's with me getting her hair done, I just sit back and I think about the power in that room. And I think I'm grateful for you. Yeah. And I'm grateful for the work that you all are doing to create a space where there's so much love of Black children.
Absolutely.
And love of their skin and their hair being good and create the creative beauty there. So it's powerful even as an outsider. Yeah. And I recognize myself as a complete outsider, but I just feel privileged to be there and honored. So thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.
I'm a photographer, visual storyteller, but really primarily I'm a mom and I have 4 children, both the regular old way and adoption. And I continue to be on a journey of, it's so crazy because we had a quick call yesterday and I started learning some about the work that Lindy does, but like I wrote down an unlearning journey. And I think that white people in general in this country, we have to be on an unlearning journey if we're going to make space and create safety for other people, people of color in the spaces that we occupy. And so for me, that's been really huge. And I've been grateful to be called in, called out, corrected, and loved by Black women. Yeah. So I just want to encourage anyone listening to this, like, listen to these 2 women, Tamekia and Lindy, and especially listen to the parts that make you uncomfortable. Because I think that is really the only way I've been able to learn. And I really don't think we give enough time and space as white people or as adoptive parents to understand how centered the narrative is around us in this and how much we have to work actually to decenter that and to unlearn and to do what's best for our kids. And our impact is more important than our intention. And I think it's easy as white people, we like to judge ourselves by our intention, but we need to start listening to other people about what our impact is. And I'm trying to do that. Yeah. So I even asked these women to call me out in this area. I will sweat and my armpits will sweat and it's okay. Yeah. And I am relearning and I am unlearning. So I'm grateful to be a part of this. So
yes. And thank you for your willingness to be open.
Yeah.
That's 100% of it, right?
I will try. I will die trying.
It's being open. Yes. So thank you for sharing. And then we have Lydia Mercer, whose family is also very near and dear to the Styles for Kids community. And I'm just so excited to have you here. Lydia is the founder of Unlearning Space. And she's also a mom, a wife, an educator, and she also advocates for others. So we have two people here who are passionate about that. And I'm just thankful and grateful for what you do. So thank you for being with us. But what do you want people out there to know about you? Who is Lydia?
Who is Lydia? That question.
Yeah.
Gosh, Lydia is so much. I think the first things that come to mind is actually an unlearning journey, just of my lived experience and understanding the harmony there is in contradiction, even in that phrase. When most people look at me, they have assumptions of who I am because of my skin color, because of my gender. And I have a very, different story. I grew up in Kansas, and I know how to shear sheep with my very white grandfather. And I would say a white family that loved me to pieces. And as a young person, I felt and received the love. And speaking of contradictions or the tensions, and feeling that love, there were still pieces missing, things that we didn't talk about because of society, because later I've learned systems of oppression that tell people this is how certain people should be and look and say and do. And so we're not going to talk about being white or being black. We're going to be colorblind because that's the right way to do things. And so we didn't have explicit, healthy conversations about me being black. And most people can't tell that I'm mixed. We didn't have conversations about my hair, about often, and maybe we did. And I will preface and say that as a young child, being an educator, brain development, there may be some things that I just didn't remember or didn't plant, and that just speaks to the need to constantly pour into young people, constantly speak and lift and affirm and talk about the things we need to talk about, so that those are the default narratives, not the narratives of I am less than, I am not enough. Because I struggled with agency. I struggled with just believing in myself, loving myself. I still do. Those silly little narratives that I'm trying to be quiet, like little Lydia, don't believe it. And really my journey has just, of my lived experience, is the reason why I founded the Unlearning Space and for my children. Yesterday in the pre-call, I was telling these lovely ladies that in 2019, I had my first daughter. And then in 2020, January, I found out I was being laid off. And then I was also suffering from severe postpartum and anxiety. So I was in a moment of grief and loss, and the most clear clarity I've ever had in my entire life that you need to lean in and you need to do this to design, to reimagine, to create the world that your daughters deserve.
Wow.
And I keep having to come back to self. This is not ego. This is collectively building the world we want. Because I think at this point in 2024, all of us in this room can talk about systems of oppression and harm and racism and classism and all of these things, but we aren't talking about rebuilding, reimagining, redesigning, because we made all of this mess.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. Wow.
So that's the work the Unlearning Space does. We unlearn, we reimagine, we build, we rebuild from the inside out. So important.
So, wow.
I don't even know if I answered the question.
Yes, you
okay.
did. Girl. That was loaded, but it was good.
Okay. It's a lot.
So as you guys know, it's Black History Month, and we really wanted to do and talk a little bit about, of course, hair, because it's the thing that I'm passionate about. That's what Styles for Kids is here to do. And then we're going to kind of redirect the conversation back to some other things. But I wanted to make this statement. So Black hairstyling and its caring methods protect the culture traditions, and hair protective rights of every Black person who would wear them.
Wow.
And this statement is to preface a story that came out in December that hit social media that we all know or may have heard by now, about a gentleman by the name of a young man by the name of Daryl George. And before I talk about this, I want to make sure I say to the Georges family that, my heart goes out to you. When I heard about this story, it really hit me hard. And that I just want to say personally, my prayers are with you as you guys are going through this. But for those of you who have not heard his story, Daryl George was suspended from school, expelled actually, I believe, because of a hairstyle that he chooses to wear, which is locks. And culturally and traditionally, locks is a hairstyle that has been traditionally worn by Africans and African Americans, Black people, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And for him to be going through this, not being able to express himself through a hairstyle is just, in my opinion, because I know there are other people who have other opinions, should not exist, right? And so I want to open it up and just ask you both, as I know you saw the story, right? What was your initial reaction? I know what my initial reaction was, but for you both, who are both moms, one is a transracial adoptive mother raising a Black girl in the world, and then Lydia, founding executive of this wonderful, organization, but also a mom, Yeah. So what was your initial reaction, when you heard of this?
At this point, I wish I could use the word surprised, but it's not surprising to me, and I'm not a pessimist. But it's not surprising, and it's not surprising. It's heartbreaking. Those feelings of sadness and frustration, those are very, very real. It just continues to reinforce this regulation of bodies, marginalized identities, whether it's women, whether it's Black people, policing bodies because of fear. And it's just really unfortunate. We think about, oh, it's just a hairstyle. Other kids may have had to cut their hair, or other kids may have had to do these things in this high school. And I think people omit or don't think about the historical legacy of hair and what that means and what that has meant ever since, Black people have been in the continent, throughout the diaspora. Like, hair is not hair. And I think trying to take that identity away and police it is terrifying. And it's really scary when it's entrenched in systems. So it's not just discrimination where somebody's being mean to somebody or picking on a family. It is a system in this school that is saying, and this district, and not just this one district, because this happens a lot.
It does.
Where it is saying that you, young man, young woman, your natural, the word natural, like your natural hair that grows out of your head, that is part of your person, is it needs to be regulated, and it's against the law. What do you think that is saying to these young people who are growing up in this world? You do not belong. Absolutely. Who you are at your very core, your natural being, is not enough. And those messages that are entrenched in system, that are being perpetuated by adults with power who are supposed to be well-meaning adults, it is harmful, it is wrong. And I just pray, like, knowing my young girls, the texture of their hair and who they are, growing up in these systems and all of the unlearning that we're going to have to support, they are enough. They are beautiful. Your natural hair is perfect. You are enough. It just, yeah, to the Georges family, like, just sending love. and just, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I wish I could say I was surprised.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching.
Heart-wrenching.
It is. Roxanne, what's your...
Thank you so much,
comment?
Lydia. Wow. I want to say, when you said, I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. For me, this was years ago, but I remember a situation of blatant violence and racism. And I was having a conversation with a Black woman that loved me enough to tell me the truth. And I said, I'm just so shocked. And she said, that's because you're a white person of privilege. That's why you're shocked. And it was so, because I thought I was saying the like right thing to say. And she just schooled me exactly. And she said, we're not shocked. I'm not shocked. And so I appreciated that moment, because it again reminded me of like, you cannot separate yourself from your experience, and that is okay. It is important in that moment for me to then have humility and be curious. And if Black women are willing, or people of color in general are willing to do the emotional work of explaining something. And I think for those of us that are transracial adoptive parents, we no longer can say we don't know. We cannot say that anymore. And we cannot expect Black people or people of color in our life to explain everything to us. Even though I have been grateful to be the recipient of that, there are resources like this one that I hope you're sharing. I hope you're going. And I think too about the power, Tamekia, of what you're doing, because I photographed recently the hair show.
Yes.
And that room, decades of beauty. And then the historical thing that you guys were connecting the hairstyles to. And I was learning as I was photographing. And I just thought, this is so powerful, because this is not about hairstyles. And I think it's a very narrow understanding and view. And that's why I'm so grateful for your perspective. This case right now, I also send, just apologies to this family that they have to exist in a world where it is offensive parts of their body. And
legal.
Yeah, and legal.
The judge ruled.
Yeah,
that it was
legal. I know.
Now, which was the news.
And I think it's so important for people, instead of white people, we are so good at being entrenched and defending and trying to find the loophole about why it wasn't intentionally like that. And I think instead we need to think about and understand history. Part of this unlearning is, that's why when I studied history in school and then taught, if you don't know history, you wouldn't understand why that's so horrifying. And there was a case of, I think it was 2018, 2019, I remember so vividly, because there was, I think his name was Andrew Johnson. I hope that I'm getting that correct. And he was a wrestler, and he was forced to stand in front of everyone and have a white woman shave his locks. And I remember talking about that with my white children even, and saying, what is wrong with this? What is horrifying about this? And my daughter, thankfully, because my kids say every time we go on vacation, we got to do history, we got to do Black history. That's so over it. We do that a lot. But she said, Mama, it's like the slave auction block. And I said, you're absolutely right. They are humiliating him. And that what is so painful to me about that video is that you see a group of adults standing around being okay with that. And I wonder if I would have been among them before I did a lot of the unlearning in my life.
Thank you for sharing that.
So for me, this is like being really, truly, Tamekia, you have mentored me and discipled me too, in just being around the work that you do, because my daughter was told once at school that her beads were too loud. And I remember Tamekia talking about, and the women in the salon talking about Siobhan, who is, I love her so much. Shout out to all the women and the guys. But I remember her talking about beads as a rite of passage, and just me asking more questions about that and being curious. And then even seeing, right, like Beyonce's videos where she has long braids and puts beads, and I wonder like the political statement she's even making in some of that. I don't know, but it's just, once I became aware of that and realized the listen to Black women about the rite of passage that is, when this was said to my daughter in school, I immediately rolled up and said, you will not make comments about my daughter's beads unless she is purposely like this in your face, your face in class.
Right.
Like her presence and the noise of her hair is not something that you will comment on. And I said that is racist. And it also just continues to uphold white normativity, which I think a lot of racism is hidden in white normativity.
It is.
And the only way I have even had some view of that is to purposely put myself as a white woman of privilege in positions where I am the minority.
Yeah.
And white people never have to do that.
No.
Let's be clear. In this country, they really don't. But when you do and it changes your life, like it has mine, it has changed my life. And I now have a different, not that I understand, I will never say that, it's not the same, but I have a different level of like, when you are asking someone to be uncomfortable so much of the time.
Yes.
So white normativity is, because white people, this is what we love. I'm going to tell you the truth. What we love is to be in situations where there's some diversity, but we're still in control.
100%.
Where we still control the narrative, where we still control what's being said.
That's right.
And we come out on top.
Yes.
We like that. And that's why I'm like, you got to go into places where I remember working with an organization and they said to me, are you ready? We're only going to work with you if you are ready. It was an organization, amazing people of color doing like modern day civil rights movement stuff. And they said, are you ready for us to tell you when you're wrong and call you out when you're wrong? Not if. That was like the question. And I was like, yes. But do you know how painful it cost me something? But it doesn't cost me as much as it costs people to just exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it's just this really hard thing of being curious. I think white people, when we don't understand something or our immediate posture is defensiveness, we need to ask questions.
Yeah.
What narratives are we missing? What have we not understood in our lived experience? And ignorance is only a problem when you commit to it.
That's right.
I am ignorant about so many things, and I have been fortunate to have people that know and have lived experience share. But you have to be curious and not entrench and not just defend. And so the hair thing, I've learned so much from you, Tamekia. I'm consistently grateful. So,
well, thank you. I want to give Lydia a chance.
Yeah.
To jump in. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Did I just go cross-eyed? Okay.
Yeah.
I really don't, but I mean, I guess two things were just playing through my mind. I think that people become so defensive with the word privilege. And I just feel, since we're on this platform, that we understand that we all have it. When we talk about white privilege, though, we're talking about being able to navigate through this world and it be normal. It's normal. Everything is normal to you. It doesn't mean that you haven't worked hard. It doesn't mean that your family hasn't struggled. That's not what we're talking about here. So I felt moved to say that. But other than that, thank you for sharing all of that.
Yes. And I wanted to speak to your advocacy efforts because that's one of the reasons why we've initiated the new parent advocacy groups at Styles for Kids, because I know that there are parents in our community who are stilling their voices because you want to stay in the uncomfortable. I mean, you want to stay in the comfortable. But raising a Black child in the world puts you in a position where you have to learn how to live in the uncomfortable. Because you're going to have to call people to the carpet. And I love what you did in defense of your daughter and her beads. But what comes to mind is how many parents in our community may have experienced that same thing and said nothing, right? Or whose children are experiencing things that are blatantly racist. And you're not saying anything. That's not advocacy. So we have to step into the hard thing as a parent, and we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And it requires more of you, right? And for those of you out there who have not adopted yet, I'm going to say this, I'm going to speak very frankly. You might want to think about this before you step into it, right? Because if you're not willing to do that, inherently there's a problem. Yeah. And then the other side of that is that if you're already in it, you have got to find the strength within yourself. And it really comes from having a community of support. And that's why the work that Lydia is doing is so important, to unlearning certain things, and why being a parent who's willing to place themselves in a position where you feel uncomfortable or humiliated or whatever the case may be, in the benefit of your child, you have to do that.
Absolutely.
You have to do that, right? And so that being said,
Tamekia, can I say one thing?
Yes,
too?
you can.
Also, I realized, when my daughter was called racial slurs,
Yes.
I came home and I told my husband, again, in my own white fragility, I was crying.
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is so hard.
Mm.
I can't. And then another Black family that I know said, you again, here you go. You're uncomfortable about having to go in the school, and they're going to listen to you more than they would to me.
100%.
And I thought, even in this,
Mhm.
I have white privilege to go in and say my daughter is being called a racial slur. And how dare I even feel a type of way about that? I am offended because I really do feel like that is an offense that God takes offense at.
Yes.
Because we are all created in the image of God, in the Imago Dei. I really do believe that. But again, I was making the narrative somewhat about me.
Yeah.
And again, a Black woman loved me enough to say, look at you go with your privilege again.
Yeah. Yep.
And I just say, even in that, then I had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go in and advocate. And I want to say this, I don't know, because I am not clearly, right? And I don't have the lived experience of a woman of color, but I have listened to many saying, even though it was hard for you to go in and do that, it did not cost you as much as it costs us.
Oh, man.
Because you are not affirming your own humanity.
That's right.
I was doing it on behalf of my child.
Okay.
Oh, that's a whole,
yes. Black woman.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I just think being a part of this, and I guess I just want to say to white people too, if you're thinking about adopting or if you have a child of color in your home, like, this is so messy, and you will make mistakes, and you will be wrong, and you will have to deal with that and reconcile your own issues about that for the sake of raising a Black child.
Yeah.
And that is your responsibility, and that is what you signed up for. And it doesn't matter if you didn't realize how hard it would be, and just do it. None of that matters. None of that matters. So, and thank God there are voices of people telling us the truth. When people tell you the truth, believe them about their lived experience. So 100%. that is just another aspect of my privilege.
Yeah, and don't try to rationalize it away.
Yeah.
Because that's my story, my experience, and try to see it from a different lens. And sometimes it's not easy to do that, right? Because you don't have to, right? But in one essence, you do have to, because now you have to see it from the perspective of raising a child who's going to have that lived experience, right? Ooh, that was a lot. We're going to keep going.
Already, yes.
We're going to keep going. So, this question is to Lydia. How can parents in our community unlearn behaviors that may not be helpful as they're advocating for their children? Especially, and this is popular among our audience, is that a lot of our families are living in predominantly white communities. Yeah. So I want to get your perspective on that. Like, how can they unlearn some of these behaviors that are not really helpful for their children, especially as they are raising them to be a Black person in the world? Yeah.
Unlearning is a process. And I think we live in a world today where we are very outcomes based. Like, we want to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to check off the box. I have been successful because right? And I think that's false. And that's not how we should think about raising and loving a human being. Understanding that we have all been socialized in these systems of oppression to think about things in a certain way. We won't go here, but capitalism, living in a patriarchy, all of these things have us thinking that we belong in a certain way. And it's harmful and it's problematic. And so unlearning is a process of being open and looking forward to the mistakes. But you're only going to be able to unlearn if you're aware and if you open yourself up. If you're not going to open yourself up to understand, oh, these systems don't exist. This isn't real. Racism is, we are in 2024. We had a Black president. We're, all of these things, all of these things are so harmful. Unlearning means you're understanding a system that has been entrenched since it was designed. It's not broken. It's beautifully and magnificently created to harm certain groups.
Wow.
It's yes. And so I said yes to myself. Is that enough?
Yes, girl.
And so if you are not aware, you can go through life living your normal and perpetuating harm on groups because you have these blinders, right? The expectation is not for you to know everything and just to, oh, I know this, I know the right thing to say, I know da. That's not the expectation, right? The expectation is being open and choosing to learn and unlearn. And on top of that, unlearning being a process and a journey, part of that is action and choosing to be uncomfortable. I know you were talking about safe spaces. Safe spaces don't exist. But you know what can exist as an adoptive parent or as a parent who's parenting marginalized people of color, Black kids? You can create brave spaces, courageous spaces, so that when you
That's so good.
when you make a mistake, you acknowledge it. As an adult, understanding this hierarchy of power, and even as a white parent, being able to say, I made a mistake. I should not have said that to you, and I did not know, and I am sorry. You know how powerful that is? Being able to do that inner work, that mirror work, we like to call it. Thank you, Dr. Sean Wright, where you go inward, right? You have to go inward, because if you don't go inward, you are going to continue to perpetuate this system, and it's harmful. And even those well-meaning, lovely people, even those liberals or whatever you want to label yourself, you're going to keep it here in the intellectual, and you're going to be able to say the right things, and you think you are a good person, but you're still doing the same old ish. Rather than going in, doing that mirror work, pivoting, shifting. How am I changing, right? So that I am centering the humanity of this human being. How am I creating an expansive space for them to self-actualize, for them to be a part of a community, for them to be on their liberation journey?
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And so, I mean...
And embracing it.
Like, it's messy as hell.
Yes.
Messy, messy, messy. But that's what it's about. If we don't collectively choose to, this unlearning journey, I mean, we know the world that we have. We know what it is. It just gets entrenched and changed, and it's all icky. And people can say it's no longer here. But our kids, we deserve a reimagined and different world, and it starts with our own unlearning and our own transformation. And we believe then you're changing systems, you're changing policies, you're making different decisions because you see other groups. You are in collective with other groups. It's not just about your privilege, your normalcy. Like, this is what everybody experiences.
Roxanne,
you're taking notes.
I love it, girl. Take notes.
No, and I appreciate the correction about a safe. That blows my mind. That is so good. Thank you. That it's not a safe space. That it's a brave and expansive. That I'm gonna meditate. That me and Jesus got a lot to talk about later. Wow. No, I really appreciate.
You can't promise anyone safety.
No,
we can't,
because that's still me centered.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
That is still me. Thank you for saying that. No, I'm thankful. Thank you for saying that. That is, wow.
Powerful.
Wow. No, that is so good.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to get it together.
It's transforming. Yeah, hearing that. So Roxanne, what work have you personally done? Like, just in response to what Lydia is saying, like, talk to the other parents out there. I mean, because obviously, I mean, you're open, obviously and you're putting forth the effort, right, to truly understand. Like, how did you arrive at that place? Because I'm gonna speak very frankly. I think that a lot of parents, just based on my experience, are still walking in a lot of unawareness. So how do you move from the unawareness to more walking in more
privilege, being aware?
Yes, being aware. Yeah.
Oh, that's
what was your journey?
Yeah, it's a huge question. I mean, like I'm still a reformed white savior because I wouldn't have self-identified that way in the beginning of like even my career, but looking back, it's exactly what I was. And again, it was at really key moments where I was told I was wrong. Oh, this makes me want to cry. I don't know. I think it was from God. Conviction to ask questions instead of be defensive.
Yes.
And that changed my life.
Yes.
I would say to people like, be curious and ask questions about what you don't understand instead of assuming that the way that you have been taught is the only way or the right way.
Yes.
And I think, again, for me, a lot of it goes back to being in spaces and choosing to continue to be in spaces where I was the minority and it was really uncomfortable for me. And choosing that over and over and over again.
Yes.
And that
It
has
gave you a
transformed my
different
life.
lens,
And
right?
yes, but it's also like listening as a mom now of a Black daughter and of white kids, like even parenting both those groups in the same household is very difficult. Trying to create a brave space for all of those kids is hard. And I don't know that I don't know that I'm doing it well all the time, but I am going to die trying.
Yeah.
And so I want to continue to grow. And I think listening to the voices of adult transracial adoptees has changed my life. So I want to encourage you, a lot of adoption groups, a lot of even conferences or books you read, they're by the adoptive parents. Don't listen to me. Like literally don't listen to me. Listen to Lydia, listen to other people who have done the work in this space, but listening, I remember I was just telling Tamekia, I was at a conference, which is actually a very helpful conference. Tamekia goes as well. But I was, and I was listening to an adult woman who was a transracial adoptee, and she said, she was quoting research that, so I'm going to get this wrong, but the research study was, adoption is the only super traumatic event that we expect the recipients to be grateful. And I thought I had done a lot of work around that, but it stung me when she said that. And I always say to my kids too, when we are triggered, a lot of times we hide from that as people of privilege, or it like offends us. So we bounce, or we remove ourselves from the chat, or we, whatever. Triggering for me, I've learned, is a way that God uses to invite me into more healing. What is triggering you? Why are you upset? Your privilege is being questioned, or something is making you uncomfortable. And what is that? And lean into that and just be curious. And I will say all day, learn real history. We have not learned real history in our schools, and that is part of the problem. Like I have a t-shirt that says, let's just start with telling the truth and see what happens.
That's right.
It's not about, what critical race theory or whatever. It's like, no. I'm not even going to go to the school board and argue that. Let's just tell what actually happened. Or get other people to write the narrative, right? There's that African proverb that says, until the antelope tells its story, the story of the hunt will always be told by the perspective of the lion.
That's right.
And just recognizing that I have only been listening to that one narrative.
That's right.
So who is missing from the and they have the money and they have systems of power, and it has been designed that way.
That's right.
So it's just asking the question, who's missing from this table?
Yes.
Whose voice needs to be heard? Who are you not listening to that you could listen to? And it doesn't mean that you don't. I'm actually wearing a shirt because I was teaching earlier today that says your story matters.
Yes.
I actually believe that about myself too.
Yeah.
I just know that in the journey of adoption, cannot be centered around me. And the whole movement, I think even, in the church, we've gotten this wrong. Like people want the cute multi-racial Christmas card. That's not about you.
No.
That is not about you. There has been trauma for that to exist. And even to start with to acknowledging that like in God's perfect design world, adoption would not exist. This is not God's way that he gave you a baby.
That's right.
This is not, I think we have to get really real about the loss that had to happen. And that's why I tell my daughter all the time, you will never be forced to choose between me and your first family.
That's right.
You will never be forced to choose. Because you can love us both. You can be mad at both of us. You can have all the feelings about both of us.
I will never, I'm not trying to replace.
That's right.
I'm trying really hard to like love and support the human you are. And I'm trying to learn what that means.
Yes.
But like this is not a competition. And if you don't, I'm speaking to white women, because an amazing Black speaker, Tyler Burns and Jamar Tisby, on their podcast, they always say, white people, get your people. So I'm speaking to my people right now.
Okay.
Do your own work, because if you don't do your own work and you're triggered, and again, I'm telling you, if you are going to adopt, or if you're on the adoption journey, trust me, you will be triggered.
Yes.
Trust me, your privilege will be questioned. You will want to say things like horrible things like, do you know how much I do for you? Do you recognize what please get yourself and get a hold of yourself and do your own work so that you can be present, because this is not about you.
That's right.
And I think that God holds me, as he asked me to love my daughter, and even all parenting is hard in general, right? But love my kids. He's reminding me how much he loves me.
Yeah.
And how gently he holds me. And I can offer that freely without needing to be right, needing to save anybody from anything, because I'm not saving anybody from anything.
That's right.
My daughter has lost a lot. And also, when you start being a white person that goes in as a minority into predominantly Black spaces, you truly realize how much your kids have lost.
That's right. Yes. And then
because communities of color have so much to offer.
Yes.
And again, racism has not just stolen things from people of color, it's stolen that understanding from white people, because racism has an adverse effect on us too. It's not as important to center, but they have lost so much. When you spend time in the salon at Styles for Kids, you
Phenomenal
understand the richness. You even as an outsider, that I recognize I always will be. I just think this is so amazing and special. There was a reason why women in the civil rights movement planned and plotted at hair shops.
Yes. Amen.
Think about that. That is powerful, what's happening in those spaces.
Yes.
So like, I recognize that as a guest, even though I will never fully participate in it, I will, every chance I get, my daughter will be in those spaces. This is why we attend an all Black house church. Like, there's things that are mostly Black. There's a couple of us now. They're actually folks from West Africa. It's been such a gift. But like, when you go into those spaces, you realize the richness of that space, and your white saviorism that you think you don't have, but you really do, because you grow up in this culture. It will start to die.
That's right.
Because you will recognize it is not about you, and to decenter yourself and to realize the richness in those spaces.
Yes.
You will have a new grief for what your child has lost.
Absolutely. And now you created that brave space that Lydia is talking about.
I'm going to take that away, and I'm going to always give you credit.
Yes, I am always going to give you credit too.
Yeah.
Because now I have all these things that I'm feeling within me that I don't have room to talk about, that I'm hiding, that I'm stuffing, that are continuing to traumatize me in my adoptive family. But now I have that brave space that I can speak into, because the people around me love me enough to shift their lens.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope and pray. I hope and pray.
And I'm sorry, I gotta ask you this question, Lydia, because there are a lot of families in our community that are biracial. And I really want you to speak to those moms out there who might be missing this, right? Because I'm married to a Black man. Well, there's still room for growth and opportunity, and there are places that you might be missing this. And I want you to speak to that, Yeah.
Right off the bat, you are missing it. Period. So I'll just.
I mean, tell it like it is.
I do want to say.
I love it too.
It's a gift. Your directness is a gift. Receive it, people.
But
wow.
I was a history teacher too. That's why I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I love you so much.
And you made me think of one other thing. I promise I'm going to answer that question too. But when I think about the family that I grew up in, and hearing you talk about your family, I think of, again, it's language, but to me, it is so, so, so important. I hear a lot of the time people talk about like inclusivity and creating inclusive spaces. When I think about any type of unit, a village, a community, a family, a collective, to me, what I believe is so important is not creating inclusive spaces, but thinking about how do you create an expansive space where all voices are lifted and equal in the same way? Because when you think about inclusivity, someone is including someone else. So there's a power dynamic. There's still a power dynamic, and somebody is valued more than the other. I believe that children have a wealth of beautiful knowledge from their lived experience. My 1.5-year-old is teaching me more than you can imagine. And so as you're parenting and as I'm parenting and I'm making mistakes all the time, I'm thinking about how am I creating in collective, not for this community for my children. Like, what does that look like in my neighborhood, in my household? And it's hard because we're not used to that.
Right.
Wow,
We're used to these
yes.
hierarchies. We're used to this, and this is how we do things. And so trying to change that is hard. But to your question, because of these systems and because of how we've been socialized, okay, if we are not aware or we are not choosing to go on that journey, then you are doing harm. And I can say that I have done harm to my own children. And when I was teaching, I have done harm. I loved the hell out of my students. But just like my family loved me, not addressing these systems that are harming our young people and telling them that. So I usually wear my hair natural, and my name was Miss Young back then. I got married, so I'm always young. But I have this big natural hair.
Yeah.
And my students would be like, Miss Young, why don't you straighten your hair? You would look so much prettier with straight hair. And I think about, what is that rooted in, right? What is that rooted in? That's rooted in thinking that like white dominant culture is beauty and that my hair should be straight for me to be beautiful. And so you have these well-meaning people in spaces, including myself, right? Who on my journey was where I was, but I chose to be on a journey. So I'm growing and I'm unlearning. If you have people who are choosing not to do so, then you're just perpetually harming young people. You're perpetually, even though you love them, you can say you love them. You are harming them. You are harming them. And you have to create with them, for them, with them, these spaces where that they can be. Like, to me, this is a liberation journey. You have to allow these young people to like self-actualize, not to assimilate to who you want them to be so that they can be successful in this world, but you want them to self-actualize so that they can be the beautiful, magical, amazing young person that brings all of these gifts into the world that we don't even know exist yet. If we do not create these spaces, we're just going to continue to have these young people who feel like they need to assimilate and shine, and they're not, or excuse me, and dim their shine. And to me, that is so heartbreaking. And when I think of my children, my girls, I'm just like, oh, if these systems get a hold of my children and try to, dim their shine, I'm like worried I'm going to lose it. And I'm a very calm, loving person.
Exactly.
But I just like, and
then
so
an angry Black woman comes out, honey, because when it comes to
I'm getting hot now. I'm getting hot. But it's like,
White women can just cry and then we get the same response.
but like, I had a loving white mother, and you may be a white person who says, I have people of color who are my friends. I have, all of this. That doesn't make you aware of all the ish and harm that you are navigating that has been passed down in your bloodline.
That's right.
I mean, you have to deal with it. You have to metabolize it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to deal with it, or else you continue to pass it on. And it doesn't matter that your husband's Black. It doesn't matter that your friend is Black. This child, right? And so it's work. But really, when you think about it, it's loving yourself and it's loving that child.
Wow, that's
That's
powerful.
what that is.
It's loving yourself and your child. Oh, that was powerful. I hope y'all are taking notes. That was good. That was good. Oh my gosh.
A dear friend once said to me, it says in the Bible, love Jesus as yourself, but I don't see you loving yourself very well right now. So how dare you try to go around and love other people? That's powerful. Like the unlearning that is part of our birthright, to unlearn what we have been taught that is against what God says about all people.
It is.
You are amazing. That is so powerful.
It's not me. I mean,
thank you. But thank you.
You're right. Like the assumption is, love yourself. Like a lot of the world does not love ourselves because of these systems that tell us we are unworthy, we are not enough. And so, I mean, it is in complete tension with God's word. But not but, and. Not
Yes.
but. Yeah.
It is.
That was
It was
powerful.
so powerful. I love these two perspectives. You guys are just amazing.
I am just gonna listen back to this and skip all my parts
Listen,
and only
me
listen to yours. Wow. I'm trying to pay attention, not just take notes on what Lydia's saying.
I love how much I'm being challenged through this, but also everybody who's listening, how we're all being challenged, right? And I'm also on my own personal journey, and I was sharing this with you guys yesterday, and I feel led to share it now. But I think the one thing that I struggle with that is the hardest thing for me as a Black woman in the world is that, you know, I have all these traumas, you know, things that have happened to me that I feel like to some degree I've experienced some healing, right? Some healing. I'm getting over it. You know, I'm moving on, you know, reimagining this space and this world where it's different, but then I'm still living in a world where those traumas are still constantly happening to me. So how do you heal when you're still walking through things that are causing trauma? Like it is one of the hardest struggles for me as a Black woman, and just learning how to manage all of that along with being a wife and a mom and a nonprofit leader, all the things, right? You know, that are coming at us every day. So, but thank you guys for being with us. I mean, this has been an amazing podcast. I hope you guys have taken notes. But in conclusion, I just want to ask both of you, like, what's your number one resource that you would recommend for parents who are deciding to get uncomfortable? What's your number one resource? Something that's helped you or you feel like it's going to help our community.
We've not just met, Tamekia, but it's not been a super long time, and I just adore you.
Yeah.
And all that you are building and reimagining in this world.
Yes. Thank you. It's the kids that motivate every. It's the kids. Oh my gosh!
Just want to point it out and shower you with love, and that in this journey and continued harms, you have still built and created and done and are such a beautiful human.
Thank you.
And so I feel like that is hope.
Yes.
Right. So I just wanted to say that about you.
Amen.
So thank you for inviting me. Yes. And
thank you for saying yes.
Yes. The resource that like I've been reading over and over and over again is called 4 Pivots by Sean Ginwright out of the Bay Area. And the reason that I love this book is he's a storyteller, so he writes it in narrative form. But what he is writing about is how do we take these very abstract concepts of social justice and how do we, and there's 4 pivots, how do we actualize those and implement those? How do we move from a place of just keeping and intellectualizing all of these things, but actually implementing and actualizing them? He talks a lot about how, especially in this world where there's so much to resist, and I think the definition of that word is expansive and should be, because I think of resisting more than just fighting. I think of it as love and joy and laughter. That too is resistance in this very hard, challenging world. But he talks about we need to be able to sit in a place of discomfort and resist and fight. And we need to be able to get to a place where we are doing the reimagining and we're working that muscle. Because if not, it's just hopeless and it's sad. Like we can sit and talk about the mess all of the time, but we need to like work that muscle of doing things differently because we created this. Human beings created this mess, right? And so I just love this book because I think it could potentially help parents pivot their mindsets to think about how they can do this work with their children. It's changed my life. So I would highly recommend that text.
Thank you. That's wonderful. What about you?
I'm going to add
Mhm.
Good.
I when you asked me this question, I thought a lot and reflected about it. And my first response was to start listing all the things that you can read, all the things you could listen to, all the conferences you could go to. But then I thought, you know what? White people love that because it's a checkbox.
There's a checkbox.
And as soon as we do it,
yeah.
then we're like, okay, now I know. And we move on that energy, like we almost appropriate that knowledge sometimes and then just say we now know it and own it. So if I'm admitting my sin.
Hey, girl,
Listen.
put it out there. Yes.
So, and I say that again with love because I've done that. So I want to, and just go back even, Tamekia, to what you said. Like, I apologize and I'm sorry for the ways that you have to exist in the world, that it's wounding people like me, people that look like me, myself, possibly, right, have personally wounded you. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. And I think if we're ever going to move past, we cannot make this about reading a book.
That's good.
We have to make it about listening and being willing to admit the lack of your understanding and knowledge and the lack of depth of insight. And that is the only place that true freedom comes, is actually knowing your limitation, I think. For me, I think the moment I realized I could raise children, of course, a lot of adoptive parents, right? We adopt because we love the kids and we want them to have a good life and all these things. But when you realize you will never love your child the way God loves your child, I don't care what race they are, that is true. That is a humbling moment.
Yes.
When you're not as good of a parent as you thought you'd be, that's a humbling moment. I have them often.
Yes.
And when I realize my lack of being able to raise a Black woman because I'm not one, and I'm trying to do that, I need to come at that with my own lack, and bring that to, for me, it's to bring it to Jesus, but it's also to be humble enough to receive from people that are willing to speak into my life. I also want to say that I have heard from people of color and Black women, like, we are so exhausted of correcting y'all. We are exhausted. So I say that with, like, there exist the resources out there. Go find them. We cannot expect Tamekia or these people that are in our lives to constantly correct us. That's it's a toll on them as well, I've heard. And when they do, listen. When somebody loves you enough to tell you, stop doing that, you shouldn't do that. I remember a woman told me once, like, I don't care what you do with your white children, but your child that is Black, do this. And I was like, my first response was, how dare you? And then I said, I'm gonna actually preach I listen to practice what I preach. And I said, thank you. Yeah. Can you tell me more about that? Be curious. Realize when you true freedom comes from knowing.
Write that down. Be curious.
Good one.
True freedom comes from knowing you are going to fail at this and you're not going to be as good at it as you thought. And it's going to be way harder than you thought. And don't let that make you puff up in pride. Let that make you go down in humility and realize that, like, it's worth it, because if what you say is true, right? If what I say is true is that I want the best life for my child, then I will be willing to be humble and be wrong.
That's right.
And listen. And I would say, pay attention to the spaces you're in. I don't care what anyone says. We're making a move because we want my daughter to have more than one Black teacher in her academic career. We want her to have half Black teachers, and we are moving. That's one of the reasons we are doing that. Yes. Go to spaces where your kid is not the only one. Yes. Go to places where you are uncomfortable. I remember we go to one of the first times we went when my daughter came into our home, and she wasn't our daughter yet. We were caring for her during that time, but we went to the African American Arts Festival on the South Side, and I will never forget. She looked around at everybody and was like, she looked like her eyes got real wide, and she looked at me and she goes, "Now you the only one." And I was like, woo, yes. Whoa. And so Tamekia knows my daughter, and she is fiery. And I pray God is going to use that fire.
Yes, he is.
Sometimes I got to, before, I'm just going to tell the truth. But I thought, yes, she gets it. She gets it. And I said, yes. And we are going to continue to put ourselves in those spaces and be committed to that, and make it where if you are in those spaces, you are not still in charge.
Yes.
So make it, if you go to Styles for Kids and you go to the salon, realize the honor it is to be invited into that space and respect those women. Listen to them.
Yes.
Listen to what they have to say to you, even if your first response is to be defensive. If you go to places where even when we were thinking about moving, we said, who is in positions of power and influence, right? There's a lot of spaces where there exist people of color, but still all the white people are in charge.
Yes.
Look and pay attention to that.
Right.
And I don't pretend to understand all the nuance of that. So please, I don't understand all of that.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm going to try to allow my daughter to see places and spaces and brave spaces where women, especially Black women, are in charge.
Yes.
They have a voice over me and they can correct me, and she sees me receive that, because I want her to know that I love her enough to lay down some of my privilege.
That's right. Amen. Man, this was so rich. Oh my gosh, this has been such a great conversation. I just appreciate both of you and your
We appreciate you so much, Tamekia.
Yes.
Your work and ministry,
Yes.
it reaches so far you don't even know.
Yeah.
It reaches.
And that's
so
what we're here
important.
to do. We're here to like raise more awareness of the issues. But I'm gonna say this, it starts with hair. It's not just about hair, right? Hair is just a gateway, right?
Yeah.
And so you guys know I love hair, but it just opens the door to so many other conversations that are important, and especially this one. So this is
I always say, I have said to friends many times, if you go to Styles for Kids, you will think you're going there for a really amazing hairstyle for your child, and you will walk out of there with that, but you will walk out with a lot more if your eyes are open, your ears are open.
If
but it's a choice.
Yeah, if
it's
you're
a choice.
open. Yeah,
so
it's a
you will
choice.
walk
Yeah.
out changed.
Yes,
You will, if
100%.
you really are paying attention.
100%.
What a gift.
It is. Yes. Thank you guys. This
And
is
shout out to Styles for
amazing.
Kids.
Shout out to Styles for Kids. Yeah, year 12. We're going to keep it going. Keep this ship rocking. So for those of you out there who maybe it's the first time you've joined us, we have some other podcasts out there on our YouTube. So make sure you follow us at Hairitage Talks. So that's HAIRTAGE Talks. And you can follow us on Instagram. We're also on YouTube. And then, of course, all of this valuable information is a resource on Styles for Kids. Real quick, you guys, how can people get a hold of you, Lydia?
Hey, no. Email is great.
Okay.
You could our Instagram. I'm terrible at social media, but our Instagram.
No, she's not.
It's great. It's great.
Your organization is
amazing.
Need to follow it. It was good.
Yes.
Thank you. Shout out to Tiffany.
Yes.
But on Instagram, Unlearning Space NFP, and Unlearning Lid on Facebook. Or you could just email us. My website, www.unlearningspace.org.
Yeah.
You can find me. I'm there.
Absolutely. We're
And please
do some great work together in the future. But Lydia is a great woman to know, and you need to make her a resource for you. Yes. And Roxanne, how can we get a hold of you?
I am, well, first of all, I want to be on both of the email lists and win the book, pay Black women. That's also pay them.
Yes.
When they release things, when they drop things, when they publish things, buy them at full price.
Yes.
And pay them. So if Tamekia comes and speaks, if Lydia comes and speaks, pay them.
Yes, that's right.
I am available. So my photography, my LLC is hawaimages.com. And I do visual storytelling. I love working with organizations like Tameka's. I am privileged to be able to do that and blessed. And then I am on Instagram at HAWA Images, or at my personal Rox Engstrom. Although, don't follow me just for like adoption content, because I keep a lot of my daughter's story private, as it should be. So that's not the primary thing that and I talked to her about before I came on here. I was telling Tamekia, I asked her a lot of questions about this, and just, I try to really, I think adoptive parents also need to understand that there needs to be boundaries about what's shared. So sometimes people are disappointed when they go to my Instagram, because it's not all about the exploiting of my child's story. So prepare to be disappointed. It's just going to be when she's amazing. That's what's going to be on there. And I always also want to know that her first family can see anything ever that I have said or that's put out into the world, and they would still feel honored by that. I hope that's my prayer anyway. So it's not going to be a lot of that, but it is storytelling and other stuff on there.
Yeah, Amazing storytelling, by the way.
Aw.
But yeah, so thank you guys. We look forward to seeing you on the very next episode of Hairitage Talks.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.